All right, guys, welcome to a very special video. After 6 long years of owning my 91 Acura NSX, it's finally time to mod it. We'll be putting on some Öhlins suspension developed by SakeBomb, as well as an AP Racing front BBK and a custom rear big brake kit. So this is Heath here. He's the owner of SakeBomb Garage down here in Fremont, California. We're going to just spend a few minutes talking about SakeBomb, how they got started, what platforms they work on, and what's their overall ethos for building high quality suspension, brakes, and other parts for a wide range of JDM cars. So first of all, thank you, Heath, for giving us the opportunity here to finally mod this NSX. It's been unmolested for so long. I told myself I would just, garage it, drive it once a week, but the mod bug is definitely itching. So
yeah, we're excited to have you here. I know it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about getting parts on this car for a little while now. What our philosophy is OEM plus. So we want to put parts on the car that kind of exemplify its good qualities. So the engineering back in early 90s or actually late 80s for the NSX.
89, yeah.
They didn't have sophisticated computer modeling, and they did, as much as they could, the engineering of the actual suspension, the geometry, super advanced, but they're still working with 1980s shocks.
Right.
We were really excited to be able to bring modern shock technology to this platform. We wanted to keep it as, true to its nature, true to its character as possible, while improving grip, handling, ride quality, etc. So we have a lot of customers that come to us, with super low mileage NSXs, S2000s, RX7s, 5,000 miles, 10,000 miles, and the only thing that they'll do on the car is the suspension. And that's one of the pieces that you can do without permanently changing anything, permanently modifying anything. You can put your stock suspension in a box.
Yeah, it's a bolt-on.
Enjoy it, enjoy the car, and you can always go back to stock and if you want to at any point. But
why did you guys decide to go with Öhlins as your primary suspension?
Yeah, so I think if we looked at all of the different aspects of the Öhlins DFV, it checks as many boxes as I think you could possibly for a mixed-use car. So it's very easy to build a set of suspension that goes around the track. As quickly as possible. It's super stiff. It's very easy to build a soft, like Cadillac style suspension, soft shocks, soft springs, soft valve and curve. It's very hard to do something that is comfortable yet has a high level of grip, high level of performance, and that's really where the Öhlins DFE comes into play. And so if Moton, AST, Penske, if any of those other ones made a good shock cartridge or something that was checked as many boxes as I think the Öhlins DFE did, we'd be building our shocks around that.
It's kind of going back to your ethos of OEM plus. Like if you're going to throw some three-way JRZs with a super high spring rate on it, that's not really OEM plus. You're talking about really more race-inspired suspension. Whereas Öhlins, I found in most of the cars I've driven with the DFVs with at least a reasonable spring rate, it's always been an improvement in ride quality over stock, while also giving you better than stock performance and handling and lap times and all of that.
Right. Yeah. You've probably heard Öhlins like road and track. The same dual flow valve, like their patented technology that makes it good on the track also makes it good on the street. So it's basically managing bumps, managing dips, and not transferring that force to the chassis while still having a stiff valving curve. But if we put the same springs on one of our Öhlins kits on a different set of shocks, it would feel much harsher. So the Öhlins dual flow valve shock just has the ability to manage these bumps and not transfer that force to the chassis, where you can be mid-corner, hit a bump. The suspension absorbs that force instead of transferring to the chassis.
So talk to me about the set we are putting on this car. This is your Grand Touring spec. How did you arrive at the spring rates of 8 kilogram front, 6 kilogram rear, and the other specs around that?
Yeah, so whenever we start out with a chassis, so that the NSX is a good example of our methodology, right? So we've done everything from Teslas to Corvettes to S2000 Miatas, and so we like to start out with a blank slate. Bring in the chassis. We'll pull out one front shock, one rear shock. We'll map the control arms, the motion ratios, corner weights of the cars, and we start on paper with what we think would be optimal for the car. that's always like, V1. Through calculations, we can put together, here's our maximum stroke, here's our contact points in the fender, so here's our limitations for where we need to, stop the wheel. And then we can start building all of our valving curves around that. And so the valving curves, we have like a higher spring rate version, but that's, people call us all the time and they're like, hey, is that, it's meant for track use. Should I get that for the street? And I'm like, no, it's literally meant for like, wheel to wheel dedicated track car. Mm-hmm. So a lot of customers will think, oh, the GT kit, it sounds like it's, it's too not soft. Performance oriented or it's too soft. But no, it's actually a higher spring rate than like the
Type R.
The Type S or
Type S?
Type R. Yeah.
Okay.
Our goal was to be more performance oriented with added comfort on top of those, those benchmarked kits.
Got it. That is exactly what I'm looking for in suspension for the NSX. This is not my primary track car. It will never be my primary track car. Mm-hmm. I might track it 2 to 3 times a year at most.
Right.
Most of the time I'm driving it is just on the street, sometimes in the canyons. So that softer spring rate with good damping, that's exactly kind of what I'm looking for. So
people would assume track suspension would perform really well on the back roads. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily the case. The spring rate might be too high, there might be too much compression damping.
So the other thing we're putting on my car today and tomorrow is the AP Racing front big brake kit.
Yep.
As well as SakeBomb custom rear big brake kit. So talk to me about AP Racing. Why are you partnering with them? And then talk to me about what the rear BBK entails.
Yeah. So again, this is going back to the OEM plus philosophy. So we started building all of the parts that we sell for our own cars, and it just happened, we'd go on the forums and say, hey, is anyone else interested in this? We're building it either way because we want it for our own cars, and it just so happened that a lot of people would be, interested in, a AP brake kit or, a custom Olin suspension kit. But part of our, philosophy was, let's not do anything to the car that we can't undo. That gets back to, the AP kit that we designed for the NSX. It was supposed to be a very OEM plus experience. So it was supposed to, give you additional feedback, give you additional thermal load that the brakes could handle. Once we did the suspension for the NSX and we started pushing the car harder and harder, we realized that the brakes were becoming a limitation.
They're like this big.
They're very small. So, tire compound in the early 90s, not very sticky.
Yeah.
Brake pad technology in the early 90s, not very grippy.
Yeah.
I think that they could probably get away with smaller brakes back then, and then extrapolate out into the future. Now we've got super sticky tires. A standard 200 tread wear tire was probably getting closer to like a race tire. Back in the 90s. So the AP calipers, some of the best, stiffest, best pedal feedback, and then we can also go in and tune the rotor sizes, tune the actual piston sizes that we're using. We can kind of tailor that to the individual application. So we did that, for the NSX. So NSX uses a Pro 5000R front caliper.
Okay.
And then for the rear, obviously, just like the S2000, we didn't want to ditch the rear e-brake. We want to keep the e-brake, so we use a relocation bracket and we make a larger 2-piece directional curvane rotor.
Yeah.
So that kind of complements the front, matches
and
the front.
That hopefully would maintain that sort of brake bias front to rear as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
For pads, you recommended the Ferodo DS2500. Again, it's like an OEM plus pad.
Right.
You're not going to get 30 minutes of extended hard braking after turn 11 at Laguna going to turn 1, but it's relatively linear bite, doesn't need a lot of time to warm up. I had those pads on my last couple Porsches, so I know all about how they felt on the street, which was really impressive. So
so this kind of gets back to like the philosophy of let's say like a modern Porsche, right? Take it out of the dealership, drive it to the grocery store, drive it to the track and back. People aren't swapping out pads. Yeah. So they usually do that by increasing like the thermal load or the thermal efficiency of the front rotors, and that lets you run a more streetable pad.
Exactly what I'm going for. Yep. So pretty much
OEM plus.
OEM plus. All of these parts.
Yeah.
That's kind of the goal. Again, really excited for the partnership. I'm gonna let the guys here, Travis and Chris and everyone, just start working on the car now, and we'll check in back here tomorrow evening, hopefully.
Yeah.
And get some final just shots of the car and how it looks after it's lowered and it's got the front and rear brakes on. And then finally, we'll go for a drive, and I'll share my driving impressions on the OEM Plus SakeBomb NSX.
Awesome. Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Let's see how this goes.
I am so excited right now. After almost 6 long years, my NSX finally has some proper suspension and brakes. Two aspects of that original 1990s design that have repeatedly proven to be major drawbacks of this otherwise incredible machine. The stock base model suspension was always just way too floaty for performance driving. The Öhlins DFV are a single adjustable damper, and they're meant to be a road and track coilover. In fact, they're also known as the Öhlins Road and Track. And that's actually a great thing for my use case because, like I was saying with Heath, my idea of a dream NSX build is OEM plus. In other words, maintaining what makes the stock NSX so great and improving on those areas where essentially 32-plus-year-old technology just doesn't quite hold up today. And I have to say, on the street, this suspension feels so good. It feels more compliant than stock. There are very few cars I've driven with modified suspension where I can honestly say the mods actually improved the streetability of the car. This is actually one of them. This car rides amazingly well now. That floatiness of the stock suspension is mostly gone now. This is still a pretty soft spring rate compared to some other aftermarket solutions. But keep in mind that the 1992 NA1 NSX Type R that was sold in Japan also ran 8 kilogram front and 6 kilogram rear spring rates. A lot of people who have driven the NA1R have complained that the stock suspension was just way too stiff for street use. That's not the case here. Despite having the same spring rate, the Öhlins DFV dampers are just a cut above even NA1R shocks. There are 32 clicks in total, and right now we've got it set to 15 clicks from full stiff at the front and 18 clicks from full stiff at the rear. So right around halfway through the adjustment range. My first drive home after picking up the car, I was driving in pouring rain on the right-hand lane of 680 North here in Northern California. And if you guys are familiar with that specific lane of that specific road between Fremont and Dublin, essentially, you'll know exactly why I chose to drive the car there, because it's such a crap road. There are so many potholes, so many bumps. The road surface is absolutely ruined, and it's a great test of suspension. And this car handled it like a champ. I wish I had my cameras running during that drive home because I was literally hollering with excitement. This suspension soaks up the bumps so well, but not in a floaty way. It's not like a Mercedes S-Class where it just completely removes any sensation of the road surface, the road texture. I still feel all the bumps, but I can feel that the suspension is doing the work now. I haven't had a chance to drive this car aggressively just yet. Like I said, it's been absolutely pouring here in the Bay Area the last week or so. In fact, a lot of areas are flooded. Rest assured, I'll have many videos on this car in the future, including some very spicy comparisons against more modern mid-engine sports cars, to revisit the question on whether there is a proper spiritual successor to an early NSX that has some proper mods like suspension and brakes, and I'll probably come up with some other quirkier comparisons as well. Let me know down below in the comments what comparisons you'd like to see. If the comparison you want to see has already been shared by another commenter, go ahead and upvote it. I'll take at least the top 2 or 3 upvoted comments, and I'll do my best to make those videos happen for you guys. Now on to the brakes. Again, these are the AP Racing 5000R with 4 piston calipers and 340mm 2-piece rotors up front And at the rear, we have SakeBomb's custom NSX brake setup, which involves using a bracket to relocate the stock rear calipers and pairing those with some 333mm rotors. Obviously, I haven't driven this car hard enough to really comment on the braking performance, but I can happily say that with these Ferodo DS2500 more street-friendly pads all around, the braking feel on the street, driving conservatively, feels basically stock. And that's a great thing. I definitely didn't want a high initial bite to the brakes. I wanted to retain that linearity and that progressive pedal feel. And these brakes with the DS2500 pads definitely achieve that. 100% in line with the OEM Plus ethos. And my NSX is only the 5th NSX that SakeBomb Garage has ever worked on. Typically they work on a lot more Mazdas, all generations of the RX-7, especially the FD, as well as all generations of Miata, S2000s, and a few other platforms. But they've been a really great shop to work with, and they've gotten me one big step closer to my dream OEM Plus NSX build. What I said in my last NSX video around getting a JDM 5-speed gear set, for now, unfortunately, that idea is out the window because the cost of acquiring one of those gear sets is astronomical at the moment. I imagine it won't get cheaper ever, but I'm just not in a position right now where I can justify that cost. But that's not going to hold me back from at least taking this car to a couple of track days in 2023. That's going to be the true test of whether these parts, the suspension and the brakes, have transformed how this car really feels and performs at the limit. So stay tuned for more NSX content to come. Subscribe if you have not already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you all in the next one.